Hello and welcome back to our Holy Week devotions. Now, none of the Gospels record anything that Jesus did on the Wednesday of Holy Week. But Mark chapter 14 verse 1 tells us one thing that did happen that day. So today we're going to be detectives and we're going to trace through the plot to assassinate Jesus Christ right through the Gospels. And actually the religious leaders began plotting to get rid of Jesus way back in Mark chapter 3 and verse 6. Jesus had just healed the man with the withered hand in the synagogue on the Sabbath, on the Jewish day of rest. And we read there, the Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. Shortly after this, Jesus healed the lame man by the pool in Jerusalem, again on a Sabbath day. And when challenged about that, he answered by saying, "My Father is working, and I am working." So we read in John 5 and verse 18, this was why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. And so John then continues to trace this plot through. In John chapter 7, it says these words, "After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea, because the Jews were seeking to kill him." And then in John 8, verse 37, the Pharisees in Jerusalem are challenging Jesus, and he says to them, "I know that you are offspring of Abraham, yet you seek to kill me, because my words find no place in you." In John chapter 10, after speaking about being the good shepherd, at the festival of dedication, Jesus is teaching and he says, "My sheep hear my voice, and I will give them eternal life. No one is able to snatch them from my hand. No one is able to snatch them from my Father's hands. I and the Father are one." We read in verse 33, the Jews picked up stones again to stone him. Jesus answered them, "I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of them are you going to stone me?" The Jews answered him, "It is not for a good work that we are going to stone you, but for blasphemy, because you, being a man, make yourself God." And then, after Jesus has raised Lazarus from the dead, doing an incontrovertible miracle just on the outskirts of Jerusalem, we read in John 11, verse 53, "So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, 'What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation.' But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, 'You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish.' He did not say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So, from that day on, they made plans to put him to death." And so then, as we enter into Holy Week, and on the Monday, we read in Mark 11, the chief priests and the scribes heard it, Jesus teaching, and were seeking a way to destroy him, for they feared him, because all the crowd were astonished at his teaching. And then Luke, in chapter 19, summarizes the early part of the week in this way. "He was daily teaching in the temple. The chief priests and the scribes and the principal men of the people were seeking to destroy him. But they did not find anything they could do, for all the people were hanging on his words. Now, of course, none of this plotting surprised Jesus in any way. Ever since the Transfiguration, he had been teaching exactly this. Mark 8, verse 31, he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And then in the next chapter, Mark 9:31, he says, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And when he is killed, after 3 days, he will rise. And then the next chapter, Mark 10, verse 33, Jesus says, see, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles, and they will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. And in yesterday's readings we heard Jesus give the parable of the vineyard and the tenants, and he says this about the owner of the vineyard. Finally, he sent his son to them, saying, they will respect my son. But when the tenants saw the son, they said to themselves, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him and have his inheritance. And they took him and threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. And in Matthew 21, verse 46, it says, when the chief priests and the Pharisees heard his parables, they perceived that he was speaking about them. And although they were seeking to arrest him, they feared the crowds because they held him to be a prophet. And so we come to the Wednesday of Holy Week, and Mark chapter 14, verse 1. It was now 2 days before the Passover and the feast of unleavened bread, and the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to arrest him by stealth and kill him. For they said, not during the feast, lest there be an uproar from the people. And then sometime later, either later that Wednesday or before Thursday afternoon, we read this from Luke's Gospel, Luke chapter 22, verse 3. Now the feast of unleavened bread drew near, which is called the Passover. And the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to put him to death, for they feared the people. Then Satan entered into Judas, called Iscariot, who was one of the number of the 12. He went away and conferred with the chief priests and officers how he might betray him to them. And they were glad and agreed to give him money. So he consented and sought an opportunity to betray him to them in the absence of a crowd. Look out for Sam's video that will follow this one. Thank you.